Hi, and welcome to The Working World. I'm Keryn Mendez.
And I'm Jamie Lingham. Keryn, we just had a great session with Lindsay Gordon, who models herself as a career coach for analytically minded people. She's published books. She's been quoted in numerous articles just about, employee retention, about things like the Great Reset. Lots of really, really good tips on, I think a subject that 10 and 20 years ago wasn't really a subject, but now, it seems to be coming to the fore, just making sure you understand how your employees feel and how you work with them. And I suppose from the employer side is this the right thing for them?
Jamie, I particularly loved about this conversation was that it took us to looking at retention from both sides. So not only from the organisation and the manager's perspective, which of course is front of mind for all leaders at the moment, but also from the employee's perspective and how, all of us can think about our roles, where we are in our careers and what goes into making decisions around those careers. And I think one of the biggest takeaways for me personally from this session was the amount of pressure or predetermination we put on ourselves around our careers and what our careers look like moving forward. So for me, this is an absolute watch for managers who are either dealing with retention, wanting to learn how to navigate retention, especially in this kind of whole war for talent. So recommend it for all those out there looking at that subject at the moment. So enjoy.
Great, Keryn. I think that it's just one more point on that. I think that it's a real insight to the other side, as managers and employers, and we think, well, what are these people thinking? I think this show and what Lindsay can bring to the show is a real insight, a little peek into that world. So absolutely enjoy it.
Agree. Hi, Lindsay. Welcome to The Working World. Thanks for joining us.
Hello. Thank you for having me. I'm super excited to be here.
Oh, it's our pleasure. And of course, my co-host, Jamie Lingham. Jamie,
Lindsay,
welcome.
Lindsay, so good to have you. So we're sort of bringing you back to Australia slowly. I know you're living in the States, but originally from Melbourne, so it's a reconnect.
Yes, I love it. I love getting to be with Australians whenever possible.
Perfect.
Well, you've found your home here. Welcome. Lindsay, we wanted to talk to you today. You've got some interesting thoughts and I think, we've talked about your experience of observing and talking with a lot of your clients around retention. And I guess, it's an interesting subject, but I think you bring a particularly unique lens from sharing those observations from both sides. And so I wanted to kind of jump into the questions if that's okay with you. It's kind of been widely discussed, that the top reason employees leave their roles or organizations is their manager. And I'm sure we've all experienced it at one time or another. And so I just kind of wanted to probe with you, is that what you're seeing? Is that still true? Is that still the current climate out there with your clients?
Yeah, I think the answer is yes. And I actually see something slightly different as the top reason that people leave. So I think, yes, I still have clients. I have 2 clients right now who have come to me saying, my last manager was just not what I needed. And I feel like my confidence has been crushed. And I feel like I, don't know what I want to be doing. So I think managers can have a huge impact. And the number one reason that I see people leave their job is because they don't know what they want. And so when you are not clear about what you actually want in your job, then the most logical next step looks like quitting. And so there's this one stat that's just like fascinating to me over the many years I've been doing this. Of the people who come to me in a job saying, I need to quit, I need to leave this company, I need to leave this industry, like I'm done, burn it all down, only 50% of them actually end up quitting. So more than 50% of my people end up staying. Maybe they move internally, but so many people don't quit when they actually get clear about what is important to them. So that's been probably the most interesting finding of my business so far.
That was a real lean-in moment for me when you said, it's not the manager. I was like, yes, tell me more. But it is a really interesting thing. And I think that, I suppose my question would be, and I don't know if you know this stat, but I'm just going to throw it at you, or the question. Of the 50% of people that quit, how many of them return back to the industry, right? So is it a moment of confusion resulting in a moment of clarity, and that moment of clarity is actually looping back to where they were? So what I'm saying, can this stuff be avoided?
I think that when somebody figures out that it's the right thing for them to leave, it is the right thing for them to leave. Like, the thing about my process is I get people incredibly clear about what do they need in order to thrive in a workplace. And if it's not their current workplace, I don't really have people going back to jobs and saying like, oh my gosh, I didn't make the right decision.
Okay, so they're not leaving the industry, they're just leaving the job. So they're still staying in the industry. Okay, fine.
Not necessarily leaving the industry.
Okay, No, that's interesting. I think that, and it makes sense, right? I think that having a purpose and having an understanding of where you're going and what you're doing is key.
Makes all the difference.
And I wonder, Lindsay, if this ties into, I read some recently in an article from, I think it might have been the Washington Post, don't quote me on that, but there was a headline where it had turned from the Great Resignation to the Great Reassessment. And this is US specific. This is probably not so much relevant to APAC, but I do find sometimes that trends kind of that start off in the US do tend to filter through to APAC. So, I mean, are you seeing, that reassessment, the Great Reassessment? And I guess, what does that look like in its current context in the US?
Yeah. I think it's been happening since the very beginning of the pandemic. I started seeing it right away. And I think the question that people are asking themselves is this really what I want to be doing? And I think it's a question about contribution. We get one life and one opportunity to contribute in this world. I think it's a question of impact. And then there's always like the what ifs of like, well, I've thought about, going back to school. I've always thought about doing my own thing. And so I think those kind of bubbled to the surface of, how do I know if I actually want any of those things? And how do I really decide in a way that's going to work for me? And then I think also another thing that I've seen recently is people know the date at which they are going to be asked to be back in the workplace, like full time or more than they want. And so I've had several clients say, in 3 months' time, I would like to either be really clear that this is the spot for me, or be looking for my next thing, because I don't want to go back into the workforce full time. Oftentimes, I think people with families, like there's a lot of flexibility in not being in a workplace. So I think that's part of the reassessment at this current moment, if you're being asked to go back in the office.
I'm looking at this hybrid model, which I think sort of seems to be the post-COVID buzzword. Everyone wants to keep on this hybrid model where they go in a day or two to the office and then 3 days at home. But I suppose, for a company, a culture is so important, right? So, I mean, how do you, as a manager, how do you manage those type of things? How do you start these proactive conversations with these people? How do you sort of head them off at the pass where they think that, okay, I want to stay at this, I want to stay at home, I want to get off my career? Because obviously this is the real retention discussion, right? And if we can add value to people at this point in the conversation, how would you suggest they start having those discussions?
Yeah. I think it's probably the first place to start is understanding what is important to the employee and what is right for them. And I think if there's more of a discussion as to, here's where we're coming from, what are the things that are most important to you? I don't think that we should assume that everybody wants to work from home. And I don't think that we should assume that nobody wants to be in the office. There are people that love being in the office and having that energy and having those connections and relationships. So I think if we can, understand the individuals and see what they're looking for, maybe there's an opportunity to design something instead of just handing down, this is what is required by this date. And I understand that it's really hard from a company's perspective to, do what's right for the most number of people. So I get that it's a really hard discussion. Yeah.
It's just a culture conversation, right? Like, because I think Zoom gets you so far. Like before it was phone calls, and now, I mean, I know, you know, everyone at my office, we just use Zoom. We call each other on Teams, and we have that face to face when we're not seeing each other. But going back to that sort of personal connection, it's just you can't replicate it. You know, you can get to a level on Zoom, but obviously the face to face, and that sort of sparks the energy and sort of, you know, builds the whole culture of the office. So it's a really, I think it's a good point, you know, really making sure to understand what everyone wants, and probably, as you said, come up with a communication to them as to why it's important for the company. Would that be right?
Yeah. Yeah, I think so.
Yeah.
And I think also looking at the benefits of more remote work, of, you know, when it is on Zoom, sometimes the quieter people have a chance to speak up a little bit more.
Yep.
You know, there's a lot of accessibility that's possible with Zoom. So yeah, I think it's all a balance. It's all about communication. It's all about the culture that you're creating with your company.
Yeah.
Interesting point around, you know, obviously understanding your employees, knowing what they want. But then I feel like for some people who want to stay and work from home, and they work for an organization where there is a line drawn in the sand, it puts a manager in a really tough spot, right? Around, you know, you've got an employee who wants one thing, you've got an employer who wants another thing, and you're a bit of a meat sandwich, I guess. You know, I guess, how would you have any tips or, I guess, advice for managers about how to bridge that, you know, view that seems to be at odds, right? Like that's a tough call. And I think that's the dichotomy that a lot of managers are finding themselves in, which then flows on to workplace culture. Like, how do you create a culture? You know, how do you create a culture where people get energy from other people being in the office, but they can't get those other people into the office? Like, it's all a bit of a, yeah.
Definitely. I don't think anyone knows the answer yet. I think we're still so much in it of what is the world's going to look like, and are people going back to the office, and is this forever? So I think that's kind of like the biggest context of we don't really know, but I would hope that there is room for experimentation, and like, I think we need a lot of creativity basically in this moment of, you know, are there small things that somebody could test out? Are there experiments we can run for X amount of time and see how that impacts people? I think that would be my one tip, is like, bring out all the creativity and curiosity and experimentation that we can to just see what's going to work for people. But I don't think we have the answer.
I'm putting my hand up. I'll be a guinea pig on this. I'd love to do it with my team. And it'd be, I love little experiments like this. It's fun, right? Hopefully, as long as it doesn't damage anyone, we're all good. One thing that we find particularly happening in Australia at the moment is that there's companies that are offering cash incentives for staff to come and join them. I mean, it's this, you know, this sort of war for talent is definitely alive and well. How much do you think that people since COVID have changed their view on cash incentives versus other incentives? Is there much research or data, or do you have sort of anecdotal evidence of what that looks like? And is throwing cash at it the right way to do it?
Yeah. I don't know the research on it. I can tell you from my experience. There's an article that I wrote with the title, you know, When a Promotion Can Be a Trap. And I think that's kind of the vibe of that. So for some people, money is going to be of value to them, and it's going to be really important, especially, you know, if their top value is financial stability or providing for their family or whatever it is. So there's going to be some people that really works. If financial stability or, you know, the monetary part of your job is not one of your top values, then you might get distracted by the shiny offer, but ultimately you are not going to feel good about taking that. And I have people come to me who are like, oh, I definitely got distracted by the shiny job. I definitely jumped ship. I looked at the high salary, but now I'm in a place where like I'm feeling just as unhappy as I was previously. So I don't want people to get trapped in that, right? And to just see the money. So I think, again, it goes back to understanding what is important to you. Is money going to make a really big difference for you? If so, awesome. If not, let's figure out what is going to make a difference and make sure we are looking for opportunities or having conversations with the company about, this is what I'm going to need in order to thrive. Is that something that you can offer me?
That's right. Because coming back, I guess, to the original question around, being unhappy with your manager, excuse me, being perhaps one of the top reasons people leave their roles. If you throw money at them, that's not necessarily going to address what the actual issue is, right? Do you from people who you speak to, do you get an idea around how much time that money buys? Like, does it, they get distracted by the shiny object?
Yeah.
Is it 12 months? Is it 2 years? Is it, I guess, just from
when does the gloss wear off?
How long does it take to sink in?
Ooh,
how long's a piece of string?
It's not looking good. From my perspective, it's not looking good. So I have somebody who currently made it about 6 months.
Wow.
But she said to me, and this was last week, she was like, I knew from a couple weeks in that this was not right.
Yeah.
But like, I wanted it to, and I had made this big shift, but she could just tell. So I don't think the money gets you very far. It probably depends on different stages of where you are in your career. Also, I could imagine that more junior folks are really going to get a lot out of an increase in salary, whereas more senior folks, it may be less important to them. So that's something to think about as well. But generally, I work with pretty senior folks, and they're like, 3 months in, 6 months in, like, nope, shouldn't have done that. Got to figure out what I really care about.
Yeah. And so just, I suppose, continuing on with that, the sort of younger folk versus the older folk, this whole millennial conversation, and it's funny because we've all got them, and you sort of you're getting older when you're calling millennials, right? And anyway, but at the end of the day, like what we're finding is with some of our people, it's exactly that, right? Like, I want to be a manager, I want to do this, I want to do that, and we're like, hang on a second, just get your core job correct first, right? Like when I teach my kids to kick a football, I say, don't worry about trying to kick it far, just kick it right. Get your technique correct. Once you get the technique, then you're going to be off, right? No point just trying to sort of kick and it goes off here and there. You have to be pretty targeted. So just what's your experience on the whole millennial thing? I mean, how do people, I know this is probably like the biggest question on everyone's lips, but how do you deal with that? How do you manage that? Because it's like, hey, I want this now. I want to be a manager. It's like you have MasterChef, everyone thinks they can be on MasterChef, then go open a Michelin star restaurant, like, come on.
Yeah. I think one of the biggest pieces of this conversation that we don't often talk about is all of the pressure that exists around career. There's so much pressure about how fast you should be advancing and, climbing the ladder and making sure you haven't stayed at a job too long.
Yeah.
And so one of the games I like to play with my clients, or when I do workshops, is pressures bingo, is what I call it. And I tell people the top 8 pressures that I hear over and over and over and over and over.
Come on, give us to it. So I'm gonna get my scorecard out.
Yeah. So I'll give you a couple. I have to be constantly advancing in my career. Each role should be more impressive and senior. My job is my identity, and it defines me. I should be further ahead in my career, given my age. I feel so behind, and everyone else has it figured out. My job has to be impressive and cool to other people, right? So it's like, this is the soup that we are all swimming in. And so
the Kool-Aid, isn't it?
Yeah. And so I think I have some compassion when people come to me and they're like, look, I've been like climbing the ladder and jumping around, making sure I'm not staying too long, and, trying to get a manager position. And I feel terrible. Like, this is what I'm being told is success. And I feel super hollow and burnt out. So I think
I didn't see that coming.
Yeah.
Wow.
Isn't it interesting? So I think the more that we can just say, like, what are all the pressures that you feel right now? Like, do you feel a lot of pressure to be a manager really quickly, or to make sure you're doing cool and impressive things? And maybe they actually want to take it slow, find somewhere that they can invest for a long time, and, you know, not be called a lifer somewhere.
Yeah.
So it's so interesting. I get to hear all these secrets about how everyone's like, oh, well, everyone else has it figured out. I'm like, who has it figured out? Because nobody I'm talking to does. So
Yeah.
I think it's really interesting to me to help people figure out, like, what do I want, instead of just like the manager, climb the ladder, get more money, success story.
Can I just give you a quick parallel to that, which is interesting? You know, I know a lot of other business owners, and there's this whole imposter syndrome that goes on. So the nice thing, I suppose, for everybody is it doesn't just happen, you know, moving up the ladder. It happens at the top of the ladder as well, I think, where people, you know, they think I'm an imposter, I'm not, you know, like I think that seems to be systemic across the whole sort of, you know, organizational food chain.
Yeah. Yep. And social media doesn't help that, of course.
I was about to say,
Yeah. So that's why, you know, I'm writing a book, and it's coming out in September, and it's all about how do you actually do what's right for you? And what are the stories of, like, I like to call them deeply unsexy results. That's what I promise my clients.
Love it.
If you want deeply unsexy results, come to me, because it's not the shiny external, like, oh my gosh, look at this thing I'm doing. It's like oh, I finally understand, like, money is not the thing that's going to get me there. And so the book that I'm writing is all about story after story after story of people who shift their mindset and actually figure out what's right for them. And it looks so boring on the outside, but it's like deeply meaningful to people on the inside when they can figure that out.
So, sorry, Keryn, I was just going to ask, just on that thread, while you're talking about the book and the interviews and things, is there one story that sort of sticks out? I'm just curious. Spoiler alert.
Yeah, there's one client, and this happens pretty frequently, but this one client, she came to me and she was like, I want to quit my job. I'm done with the industry. I'm done with this company. Like, she was ready, out. And I work with clients over 6 sessions. And by the second session, she was laughing and saying, like, are you kidding me? This job is actually a pretty good fit for me. It's just that I've been hyper-focused on these 2 downsides. And if I can make some shifts there, if I can have some proactive conversations with my manager, that would make a real difference for me. And so literally she went and did those things. And then she has still been at the same company for, I don't know if it's 2 or 3 years since I've worked with her. She's gotten promotion after promotion after promotion. And it's just like, such a huge shift can happen when you understand, like, what does this job mean to me? How does it actually align with the things that are important? Is it using my strengths? And so just a complete 180. Like, after, you know, an hour and a half of being together, she was like, oh yeah, I don't need to quit.
That's amazing. That's a success story, I guess, right?
Yeah.
That's cool.
Good one.
On the,
I love.
Oh, sorry. Go ahead, Lindsay. No, you're fine. Go.
I was just going to say, so I love when people feel like their only option is to quit. There's so much that we can do to help you assess if that's actually the right thing for you. So,
because it almost becomes like tunnel vision, right? Like, that's all you can see. Yeah. But I'm this is the naughty side of me, I guess. I'm curious on the, like, that's a success story and that's fantastic. On the flip side of that, you know, when managers have talent who have made up their mind, and, you know, the manager pulls out all the cards, and, you know, whether that's cash promotions or you know, role changes or whatever it is, you know, there has to equally be a danger or a downside to retaining and keeping, not that they're, you know, kept and locked up, but re-engaging somebody who probably truly doesn't want to be there. There must be a downside to that. Have you seen examples of what that looks like and how that plays out, both for the employee and then for the organization as well?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it goes back to the how long does the gloss of the money wear off?
Yeah.
And sadly, you're not going to get that much traction. And so I think when you keep people and it's not a good fit for them, number one, they're probably going to quit at some point. It's not like the money or the things you're throwing at them are probably going to make all the difference, especially if they're not clear what they want and what's important to them. But also, I think it affects the energy of a place when somebody's there and they don't want to be there. And I will be the first to raise my hand and say, I have been that person. It does not feel good.
Yeah.
Like, I worked at Google for many years. Part of the reason I do the work that I do is because I never really felt like I fit in there. There are many things I'm grateful about the opportunity. It was never quite the right place for me. And there was literally a moment where my manager in one of our one-on-ones was like, hello, I'm receiving feedback that you are checked out and have a negative attitude. And I was like,
ouch.
Good one. I love that.
Yeah. I was like, oh yeah, I am being that person. And it sucks. And nobody wants to feel that way, but it does. It has such an impact on the people around you and the team. And so I don't think you want to retain people at all costs, especially if it's not right for them to be there.
And I guess it's a bit of a challenge at the moment, I guess, because the war for talent is causing a focus on trying to retain talent, right? And I know there's organizations that are throwing equity at people and different methods to try and retain them. I guess it's quite difficult for managers to know where that line is between fighting hard for someone and trying to retain them versus, okay, probably I should let this person fly.
Yeah. And I think that's why I want to write this book, because to me, it's all about, if you can help your employee understand what's right for them, you're going to have a much better conversation, and you're not going to need to throw out all the things that you can imagine. It's like, no, literally, what would make a difference for you? Is that possible here? If so, awesome. And it might not actually cost you anything. And it might not actually, require big changes at your company. So if instead of the conversation of like, what can I throw at you? It's like, can I help you understand what's right for you? And then let's have a conversation about whether we can provide that.
It's, I agree. And I mean, I'm hearing this, like loud and clear from you. It's really about taking the time to talk to the people, right? Just to sit with them and to say, hey, what's working, what's not. It's interesting, I think, to your point about the manager having the conversation with you. I think that my experience is a lot of managers are very afraid of having those sort of conversations. And they're afraid on a number of levels, obviously, because they're going to lose a bum on a seat, for the one of a better expression. And then, who's going to do the job? But I think, to your point, it's a bit of a cancerous thing, right? Like, someone starts like that. They say, hey, Lindsay, she's negative, she's checked out. She starts bringing the rest of the team down, right? And I think it's having a bit of faith and confidence in yourself and your brand and your company and your product or your service, whatever you do, to have the faith that someone else is going to fill that seat. The next person will be better. But it's not always the easiest thing to do. So how do you think that managers should be approaching these conversations? I mean, should it be as blunt as what they're doing with you, or how do you sort of talk to managers? Because obviously we're going to look at this from the other side. Like, you're talking a lot of people who think about leaving, but we want to try and help work with the managers that we've got here and saying, okay, how do we counter that? How do we recognize when that train wreck is coming towards us, and what's the best way to deal with it?
I feel for the managers in this too, because if you ask the question, well, what do you want? And that's usually what managers are saying, right? Like, I can tell that you're not happy where you are. Where do you want to be? Where can we fit you in? What do you want? And unfortunately, people feel so embarrassed and guilty that they can't answer that question. And so it's like, God, even my manager is trying to help me. Why can't I answer this question? Why don't I know what I want? Everyone else has it all figured out. So I think if the manager can approach it in like, how can I help you understand what is right for you?
Yeah.
And usually the biggest parts of that are 3 or 4 pieces that I look at. Number one is helping them understand what they actually value. So if we can do a values exercise, Number 2 is looking at like energy draining and energy giving things.
Yep.
So if you can have a conversation around like, what is giving you energy in this work? Do we have agency to give you any more of that? What is draining your energy? Do we have the agency to shuffle things around on the team and give you less of that? We also want to look at strengths. And, I had a client last year who said, why did it take me until my 40s to learn what my strengths are? Like, how have I not had this conversation before? So if we can be talking about strengths and like looking at how those are engaged in the role. And then I think looking at kind of environmental conditions. So the work from home, the, different parts of that. So I think if you can have some conversations around those specifics and just look for like, look, I want to help you understand what is right for you. And let's see if we can cultivate that here.
For the uninitiated and under-resourced, say I'm a manager sitting there and I just go, wow, this is, sort of till this point in time, it's been a bit woo-woo, but now it's actually, this is real. Yeah. How do I find, as a manager, how would I find out how to do this stuff? Or where would I get, if I can't afford to get a consultant in, how would I start this journey on actually finding out how to have those conversations or what conversations to have, what questions to ask?
Yeah, I think there are lots of great books out there that have been written on career. A lot of great books for managers. A colleague of mine just wrote a book for new managers. So I think there are some great questions. And I think there's a book called The Coaching Habit. And it's all about like how to even just start asking better questions as a manager. Like, what are some of the tips and tricks from the coaching industry that you can start to use to ask some of these good questions? I think the other thing that we don't talk about enough either, and I was just having a conversation with a client the other day, is when we are under-resourced and when we don't have the time and the people that we want, what are the balls that we are dropping intentionally? Because people are getting stuck in like, 4 of my colleagues left and now I have 5 people's jobs. And so I'm burning out, but I feel like I don't have any leeway to not do any of my tasks. And I think managers get that too, right? So they're doing the jobs of 1 million people. Maybe they have way too many reports for them. So I think if we could have more conversations about what balls are we intentionally dropping? Like what are we implementing, knowing that we have fewer resources, fewer people? There's a great book, Drop the Ball. So I think that's another conversation that we get to have when we are struggling with headcount and number of people on our team.
Yeah.
That's a really powerful, I think, way to wrap up the session, Lindsay. I think, and it also links back to what you said originally around pressure we're putting on ourselves, pressure we're putting on, actually primarily ourselves. I think it sounds like from this whole conversation, that's a really clear message that's come out for me. But I just wanted to say thank you so much for your insights today. I think it's been really helpful. Certainly to our viewers, but selfishly for Jamie and myself. I can see Jamie's been taking notes.
Love it.
This is just a session for us.
We're not actually going to
go to air. This
we're not going to publish this.
That's right. Now we'll do a values exercise. So
now we're talking. Session. This is session 1 of 6.
That's right. But thank you for having me. It's just a pleasure to get to talk about this topic and to share what people are feeling and how we can all support each other better in the workplace. So thank you for having these conversations.
No, Lindsay, it's, to echo Keryn's sentiments, it's been fantastic. And I have been taking notes, I've got to say. The big takeouts for me are really about taking the time to talk to your people, to understand what they value and what they want, what's important to the employee, what's important to the company, and how do you sort of meet in the middle. I did take out, what balls they're dropping intentionally, because what I find is, in times like this where there is a lot of pressure for certain people, they don't ask for help either, which is interesting. And I think, until they're sort of drowning. So, I just think that it's really been highly beneficial. I'm sure a lot of our listeners and viewers will get a lot out of this. I think the work you do is fantastic. As I said before, it's sort of, in my mind, 20 years ago, this would have been, you know, woo-woo and magic happens, bumper stickers type things, but now it's real. And I think it's so important to be engaging this level. So we love your work. We can't wait for your book. Let us know when it's out. We'll put it up on the Working World website and LinkedIn page and all that sort of socials. But yeah, really loved having you on the show. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Appreciate it. And we'll definitely share when it's out. Should be end of
Yes.
so.
All right. Fantastic. Okay.
All right.
Thanks, Lindsay.
Thanks, Lindsay.
Thank you so
Take care.
much.
Bye.
See ya.
Bye.